So steps to purchasing. The first thing that the first step is to surround yourself with the right team. I took some time to really think about what I would tell people to do first, but it really is to surround yourself with an appropriate team. And for me, that's always been people that I feel comfortable working with and are inspired by. I mean, so often in this industry, it's referral based. So clients randomly end up with a friend of a friend or their aunt or the person that their cousin worked with. And in some cases, that person happens to be me. And I feel really...
I was say, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I think that's great. But I know that I always try to make sure that I'm the right fit for that person. And I really think buyers should be doing that, making sure that there's a fit match, personality-wise, goal-based, but also I try to surround myself with like-minded individuals regardless of what I'm doing. So when it comes to real estate, if I'm thinking about multi-unit properties, I went out of my way to seek those people out.
Yeah, I think that's something that's undervalued by a lot of people. I made the mistake too when I started, and I realize now that it made a huge impact. And I look at some of the best deals that I got. It was by aligning myself with, I guess in this case, if we're talking agents, it was agents that were in that world, understood the game, and were able to help me do it. Versus, you're right, I see a lot of people that get referred to people like, oh, well, I know them through this and this. And like at the end of the day, I pick the property, I do this, I do that. So it's kind of on me. And I'm like, you'd be surprised how much value someone can add to what you do if it's the right person and they align with what you're looking to do.
Yeah, like for me personally, my mortgage broker has multi-unit properties. My inspector has multi-unit properties. My lawyers have multi-unit properties. The guy who does my sewer is involved in real estate. Like every single person in each phase of the process is involved in multi-unit properties because that's what my goal is. It's a little bit different if you're, just trying to get started off with a single family home. At that point, I think what matters most is the personality and the comfort level, the rapport that you have, because this is the biggest investment you're going to make in your life, and you need to be able to speak candidly with the people helping you because there's a financial component to it, there's an emotional component to it, and if you can't have a really open conversation with the person that's supposed to be representing you, that is going to be a problem. So I am a believer in personality fit, and of course expertise. So goal-based, experienced in what you want to do, a good personality fit, and inspiring to what you hope to accomplish. I think if you can surround yourself with an agent and, a support group that kind of reaches above what you're maybe doing currently, but can be with you through the growth, I think that's the first most important step. So for me, I would probably go broker first and then real estate agent, or would you go real estate agent first and then broker?
I would go real estate agent, then broker.
Okay. It's hard. I know, I feel obviously biased. Obviously you should call the real estate agent first, but you do need to get your money. You do need to get your money first.
Why didn't you text me that question before we started so I could think about that a little?
I don't know. Put you on the spot.
Yeah. See, the thing that I face is a lot of people that come to me that want to get into investing. They tell me, I'm like, oh, who's your broker? And they tell me, and I'm like, that's not true. A person that's going to be able to help you grow, because the financial aspect of purchasing is probably one of the bigger, harder parts. And it's really, really important that you have a good person on the broker side that can allow you to get there. And if you're going in as a green party or someone who's new to it, and then you try to go pick out a broker, you don't even really know what you're picking, to be honest.
That's true. Yeah.
Because you don't really know the products and what you're talking about.
That's a great
point. So if you can go out and find an agent that you know is already doing the business, you've seen them help other people, then they likely know a broker that also understands the game. Yeah, and I think it's easier to get that agent's rapport than a broker's, because agents are very vocal and everyone can tell you about their agent. Brokers are a little bit more behind the scenes.
That's true. I think what that suggests, and maybe the answer is find the person in the level of the process, be it brokering, be it the real estate agent, be it the lawyer, be it the inspector, the person that you are most comfortable and familiar with and think is on the same alignment with what you want to accomplish. Maybe go to them first and then say, hey, unpack this process for me with the people you work with. Because when someone comes to me, I sort of have this in-house team that's already lined up to make sure that's going to be a smooth transaction and that I feel will already be a perfect fit for them. But if someone has that relationship with a person who happens to be in the mortgage world, and because you need to get your money sorted out first, then, I can see going to the mortgage professional first as well. But I guess the person with whom you maybe have the most natural connection
and knowledge about kind of what their industry is.
Yeah. And I always say, if they're going to give you a referral, but do your own due diligence on a referral. Just because
100%.
someone sends you, say you have a great relationship with your realtor and they send you to a mortgage professional, that mortgage professional maybe, is great for some people, but they may not be the right fit for you. I even say that when, someone chooses to work with someone else, I'm not going to be the right fit for everyone.
Yeah.
And if someone doesn't feel most comfortable with me, then I would rather them go with someone that they do feel most comfortable with.
Yeah.
In the rare times that happens. But, so that's step one. Surround yourself with a really good group of people. And that's not just trusting that they're experienced. It's about validating that they're experienced and, ensuring that their goals align with yours and that you have a good, comfortable relationship. And people, if you're in a situation like, well, I feel like I can't really ask them these questions to see if we're on the same path. It's like, well, there's your answer right there. Right?
Yeah.
I think anyone that works with me, we can have a very, very candid conversation about any part of the process. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's important.
100%.
So step 2 is what I call the draft of your search criteria. So when you're entering the market as a buyer, you have an idea in your head of what you think you want. Be it room counts, location, amount of work, features of the home, what have you. At the first level, this is like, those with a science background. This is your hypothesis. This is what I think.
15,000 square feet, 26 bedrooms.
Yeah, I'm open to waterfront, but I'm not married to it. I think you have to set this goal, this objective. And that's step 2, this draft criteria. And this is a good point where you could engage an agent to help refine that. But realistically, at this point, it's all hypothetical, right?
Yeah.
What do you say to people kind of when you meet for the first time and they've got these lists either attainable or sometimes unfocused? Because that can be hard too.
Yeah, I think most people are pretty focused, honestly. I think I get the odd person that's like, yeah, I'm game for anywhere in the city. Mm-hmm. I can have a garage, no garage, could have 6 bedrooms, could have no bedrooms. And I'm like,
those are almost harder, but
they're
good
way
to be open, but
definitely harder, 100%. Even though they're open, it's way harder to like make a decision because every time you get to a place, it's like, what are you comparing against? And like, well, over on that part of the city. But most people have like the basics down. They're like, and there's the biggest ones, like bathroom count. Like that's like I think like one of the most common ones. Everyone's like, I need at least 2 bathrooms because I can't share one shower with 1 million people. And then the garage I find is usually a big criteria, and number of bedrooms. But most houses, for the most part, I have at least 3. I have very rarely get someone who's like, I need at least 6 bedrooms. Like, so there's those aspects, and then there's also like kind of the I guess I don't want to say renovation, but the maintenance level. Mm-hmm. Some people are comfortable to get into some maintenance. Some people don't want to deal with anything. But I typically get them to give me their whole list, and I'll guide them. I'll usually like, do you want this, those main topics I just said? And then I'll ask them for their budget or location, So what neighborhood, if they're open to a few. And then I'll typically ask them what their budget is. And again, knowing the market very well, I can pretty quickly be like, all right, we just went to this list. That's 500. And then like when they say their budget's 3, I'm like...
Yeah, that's why I usually get to the budget earlier in the process, right? Because I'm like, what's your budget? Because that's going to drive the area in a lot of cases. And I say, well, what area are you interested in? And then they say, and I was like, well, that's attainable, that's not, and so on and so forth. But either way, at this level of the process, at step 2 level of the process, all of these ideas, this set of criteria that you think you have is just a draft.
Yeah.
Right. Because the next step 3, is data collection. And that's when you go out there, pound the pavement, whatever you want to call it, and actually view properties. Right. So the first thing I always tell people is the challenge is you may think you want one thing, but until you go out there and see these homes, see what your dollar gets you in different areas, you may find that what you think you want changes. Right.
Yeah.
So when you do these showings and you start comparing property over here versus property over there, and all of a sudden you're gravitating to this property for no reason, right? Yeah. They're the same house. They're just in 2 areas. Well, apparently then location is more important to you than you thought. Yeah. So in the data collection phase, you do the viewings and then quickly reassess your search criteria and try to get a little bit more focused in.
Yeah, 100%. And that's like once people say their budget, that's when I typically will be like, look, like you said, some of these are not attainable. And if someone's throwing some like kind of out of left field to give me something random, a lot of times I'll be like, hey, maybe have you driven through that neighborhood before? Mm-hmm. And they're like, no. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe take a zip out, like drive from work, like on the way home today. How about you drive there and see how your drive was?
Yeah, spare me the trip.
Basically,
sometimes it's spare me the trip.
That's effectively what it is. But at the same time, it's like I've come to realize because when I was new, I would just say yes to everything and I'd go out. And it's kind of a waste of everyone's time because I'll like, I mean, a prime example for us here is Eastern Passage. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with the location. But it is a bigger commute for a lot of people if you're coming from Halifax because there's no direct highway to Eastern Passage. Mm-hmm. And so, there's brand new neighborhoods there, good prices, some with water views and things like that. And so a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, like this is great. Like I can finally get a new home. I can see the ocean, whatever. And then I'm like, okay, we'll drive home from Halifax today and go to Eastern Passage on the way home. Mm-hmm. And then the next day they'll call me and be like, I'm not interested because by the time I got off the highway, I then had to spend another 10, 12 minutes driving into town.
Yeah. And conversely, you might have someone that works in Burnside, but has lived historically in Halifax and has never even heard of Eastern Passage. And then maybe that becomes a better fit for them, especially when they're like, man, I can get a fairly new home over here.
Exactly.
So the data collection phase is about having the showings, reassessing your criteria, and then doing research like neighborhood research, as you mentioned, historical sales, which we're really fortunate here in the province. Those are
public.
Pretty well public, but also you're going to lean on your support group and your agent about historical sales. And then part of the process, sadly, right now in this market is unsuccessful bids and missing out on properties.
Yeah.
And this is why every now and again a client will say, well, I don't know, there's nothing that looks perfect. And I'm like, we're not going for perfect. Mm-hmm. First of all, you don't have the budget for perfect in some cases, but we want to go out there and see the things that you don't want so that it helps narrow us in on what you do want.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're building your frame of reference. And, you know, even if we think this home over here is not a fit for you for this reason, let's go see it because that home is going to sell. And when that home sells, it'll tell us information about the market as a whole.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you don't like this home over here because it's on a main road, but it still sells for $300, that tells us something about what that home would be worth on a side road.
Yeah.
It's going to be worth more than $300.
Exactly.
So I think going out there, going through the process, and unfortunately seeing things sell, and whether you're bidding on them or not, you kind of take that information, put it in the data bank, because our job as a realtor is never to sell you a property. Our job is to help you collect the information so that you can make an informed decision. So that you as a buyer, when a home comes up, you're like, I believe this to be the right home for me because I have seen these other things. Like there's that expression, you got to slay a few dragons to get to the princess, right? You're going to have to see some homes that aren't necessarily fit in order to get to the right one.
Not sure I get the reference, but
Neal Binsley, there's a sword under the table. Let me tell you.
Okay. Anyways, no, that's definitely the biggest mistake I would say a lot of first time buyers make. I get that message a lot where it's like someone's like, "Hey, I'm looking to buy a house." All right, sweet. And then like we get through with the stuff, even if they get a pre-approval, then they don't like any of the houses that in particular, and then they pick one that they just love and they have to go see. And I'm like, that's a good, bad thing because like we can get there and like you don't know the difference between this and shit. And so when I get and we get there and I'm like, this is an amazing house, and then I can see that on their eyes like, is he being a realtor right now? Is he trying to up something? And I'm like, no, I promise you, like this is a great house. Or sometimes we'll get there and it's kind of shit, and I'm like, this is a bad house. Like this is a garbage house.
And this is also why we go see them in person.
Exactly. Yep. So I always tell them, I say, look, even if you're not planning to buy for like 3 to 6 months, like if you see a few that you're kind of interested in, just hit me up. I don't mind taking you out for one showing every couple of weeks because you need to process that. Because then the day when we get in the house that you're like, okay, I've seen 5. Now I'm confident to bid $100K over ask.
Exactly.
Because I know this house is a good house.
Yeah. All the time I tell people sometimes the hardest thing is when the first one you see is the right one.
Yeah.
Because you have nothing to compare it to. Yeah. And then you're right, in this market, there'll be a situation where someone will email me on a Tuesday. Yeah. On a Wednesday, we're meeting at the property. We don't even have time to have our, in-person meeting, which, there's a period there where we couldn't go for coffee anyway. Yep. So you'd meet these relative strangers at a house. You'd walk in there and, we'd leave. They'd love it. And I'd say something, well, it's been really great to meet you. Offers are due in 3 hours and we're probably going to have to be $70,000 over.
Yeah. And
that's a difficult thing, right? So again, part of what would help is when they built their group around them, their professionals, they and I would have had a chance to connect and build some rapport. But also if we had seen 5 homes before, that can help as well. So again, data collection is about...
It helps us find you houses too, realistically.
Totally.
Because something may, like rarely now, but there may be an off market. And it's just like when we're looking through the online listings, like I'm like, okay, I know this is something that really bugged them. It wasn't originally said, but this is something they didn't like. Yeah. So it allows me to be more productive for you.
Yeah. I mean, there have been tons of times where people say, oh, I don't mind a little bit of work. And then we go to a place that has like carpet and they're like, I don't want to do this. And it's like, okay, we've now learned a little bit about ourselves here.
Yeah.
So step 4 then is the offer process and the due diligence. I've kind of put this as one step because they are effectively tied together. Once you reach that point where you are ready to make an offer, people often say, well, what do we do now? It's like, well, you submit the offer. Yeah. And it's a nerve-wracking experience The nice thing, and what I always tell buyers is that, listen, everything in our offers are there to protect you as the buyer.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to outline our main things are our terms, right? Our condition terms, our deposit, and our price.
Yeah.
Realistically, those are the main things. Once we have those agreed to and we submit our bid, if we're successful, we still then have our due diligence period.
Yeah.
Even in this crazy world where people are sometimes waiving one or more clauses, there's typically an allowance in there of 7 to 10 days to finalize your financing, do your inspections, review some disclosure documents, and reflect on this purchase that you're about to make.
Yeah.
So you submit the offer. If you're fortunate enough to have it accepted, you give a deposit. Right? And deposits right now in our market, and people are going to laugh depending on where they are. Deposit in our market, what are you telling people now? Like $5,000?
$5,000. I did one today for $20,000, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, totally.
Whoa.
That's a big
but
deposit.
it was $1 million plus home.
Yeah, so it's different in every market. There's no set rule, but the deposit is important to know is held in trust and it is refundable. So if you, during your due diligence, find something that you are not happy with, you can terminate the deal and that deposit gets returned to you, provided you've done that during your, agreed upon due diligence period.
Yep.
And again, that due diligence is inspections, financing, lawyer review, disclosure review, and all that. So I always tell people it's like you're agreeing to purchase a car, but you get a 10-day test drive first.
Yeah.
Right. And at the end of that period, that's when you actually lock the deal in.
Yeah. And you don't spend any money. Like, there's no cost. Let's say you terminate the deal. There's no cost for your agent's time. There's no cost even for technically a lawyer at that point. The only person that you're going to be paying is any inspectors that you employ.
Yeah, that's the only sunk
always
cost.
Need to be paid. When they show up on site, home inspector, he's going to charge you. Sewer inspector, he's going to charge you. Radon inspection, they're going to charge you. All those things you have to pay for. Everything else, though, there's no cost in doing so. So it's not like you're about to be on the hook for a ton of things. The inspections can definitely add up, though, especially if the house is on septic and well.
Mm-hmm.
You can easily spend over $1,000 on inspections all in.
Sure.
So it's something to consider, and you don't want to be willy-nilly tossing in offers if you're not truly into the house. But on the flip side, like you said, it's a very nervous time, but you need to understand that it's not necessarily like the second, even it's accepted, you're not like super tied to it. I always tell my clients, like, if you go home and you're instantly like completely overwatched with anxiety and you're feeling like you made the worst mistake of your life, tell me ASAP. Don't wait till the last day.
Yeah.
Tell me the day we got it accepted. I'll call the agent back and try and get them to fix things up. That's not a legitimate necessarily reason to get out of a deal, but you're not going to force somebody to buy a home.
And
in
again,
that kind of situation.
I think this speaks to having the right people around you.
Yeah.
Because they need to feel comfortable going to Neal and saying, Neal, this is what's going on in my family's life. This is how this, offer has affected us. And we feel we can't proceed with this for these reasons. And if they don't feel comfortable having that conversation with you, if you guys don't understand what both sides are trying to accomplish here, they're not going to feel comfortable doing that. And then if things are going to get, either they're going to feel an obligation to execute the deal, which they don't have, or it's going to be some awkward relationship between you because you're like, well, I don't even know why they terminated. Are these people serious? Are they not serious? We love the home we offered. Now they can't. So again, you have to surround yourself with good people. And with respect to the inspection, have you ever been asked the question, well, what if it fails inspection?
Very much so, yes.
Yeah. People think it's like a car inspection where it's like it failed and now you can't drive it. A home inspection is not that.
Every house technically fails.
Every house fails a little. It's just how many fail too much.
Yeah.
No, I mean, no home is perfect. So all the home inspector does, and realize that the home inspector works for you. And the home inspector should make that very clear when they show up, that their job is to be there as an advocate and an extra expertise opinion for your benefit and for no one else's benefit.
Yeah.
They're just there to tell you the current shape of that home. Knowing and understanding that no home is perfect, they're going to summarize all of the deficiencies. And some of those are going to be based on code, which code is not applied retroactively unless it pertains to wood energy technology or knob and tube wiring. So these are going to be things that, hey, when your home was built, this was code. Now that wouldn't be okay. But it's still fine to be left as is. Mm-hmm. Then there's general home maintenance stuff. So if you've never owned a home before, an inspector is going to go around and tell you that, you need to scrape and paint your wood exterior. You need to keep some of these elements caulked to prevent water intrusion. General things that as a novice you may not know. And then there's going to be the items that immediately need attention. And these are what you're really going to want to take stock of and assess how they make you feel about the property.
Yep.
So even having an inspector with whom you can talk more candidly, and this is why I always tell buyers to try to be there for the inspection.
Yep.
When you get that report, it's pretty overwhelming.
So usually 30 plus pages.
Yeah. And, if you weren't there firsthand or if you've never had an inspection as a buyer, it's natural to feel like, oh my gosh, I somehow seem to have purchased the one home on the world that it's completely falling apart. Yeah. And it's 9 times out of 10 not the case. So you want to be able to have an understanding with the inspector of, okay, what is really going to affect the immediate enjoyment of my property? What's something I need to address short term? What's something that you're just telling me because you have a liability concern if you don't tell me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 things with the inspection as well. Hire a professional inspector. Don't.
But my Uncle Carl built a deck last year by hand.
We built a deck by hand. None of it's to code. Yeah. It's on deck blocks. He's coming to inspect the house because he knows what he's doing. Yeah. Or on the flip side, what was I going to say about that as well? Yeah, I think it's like you said, just understanding like that 30 pages. Oh, sorry. Even if you inspect a brand new home, there's going to be stuff on there as well.
100%.
Like it's really not indicative of the fact, like Kelly said, there's 30 pages. Every house is going to have really well-maintained houses. Well, just the big thing is that first list, which almost every inspector does. Usually it's red or it's the first page, whatever it is. Those large items, those are the ones that you really got to focus on. The rest of things are going to be really small, kind of miscellaneous.
Yeah. Well, it's like anything else. We always say advice is free.
Yeah.
And it's often worth what you pay for it when it comes to like your Uncle Carl doing the home inspection for you. And, there could be if you have people in your life personally who, you really... They do have a high level of expertise and you do respect them and you think they are the sort of people you want to be surrounded with because they are inspiring to you and you are trying to get on their level or whatever it may be. Absolutely bring them into the fold. But just, again, be wary of who that is. And then when you get that inspection, you hope that when you write an offer, just to backtrack just a little second, you hope when you write an offer, you have a good understanding of all these material issues with the home. And a good agent can take you there and say, this is what I can tell you about the roof shingles. This is what I can tell you about the window. This is what I can tell you about the electrical panel, the furnace, the heating, the plumbing, all of these things. And our offer should be reflective of this knowledge. Okay. The inspection then is only meant to address items that we were not already aware of and that materially affect how you feel about the home. Mm-hmm. Right? So this isn't a chance to be like, well, we knew the roof was old, but the inspector said the roof is old. So like, can we go and get money now? It's like, that's not really acting in good faith. That's not what the inspection is there for.
Yeah.
The hope is, again, that you would have had that information in advance.
Yeah.
But if you discover something new, then you have to decide, okay, does the mold remediation in the attic, right? This comes up all the time. Attics, if they aren't ventilated well. Yeah, you've got a humid climate here. They tend to get a little mold or mildew staining on the sheathing. Now, the attic is outside the living space of the home. You never go in your attic, but no one likes the M word. Mm-hmm. So then you have to decide as a buyer, how do I feel about this possible mold issue in the attic? Do I, 1, want the seller to address it? Do I, 2, want some sort of reduction in price? Or do I, 3, kind of not really care and am more focused on the fact that I got a good deal on this property that I just want to proceed with the sale as is? Yeah. And you as the buyer dictate that, right? The inspection is not pass or fail. It is just, here's some more information about the property that you maybe didn't have before, and you can make a better informed decision.
Number 4, you call Rainbow Halifax. We do attic mold sprays.
That's true. One of Neal's many companies. He'll mow your lawn, sell your used car, and then also
spray your attic.
Yeah.
I do them all myself too, so it'll be me. They'll come personally to your house and do it.
Yeah, that's full service.
Yeah.
So, provided you get through this due diligence, you've gotten the inspection, there's stuff in there because there's always stuff in there, but you feel like you can live with it, or you've gone back to the seller and renegotiated and come to terms. Hey, we couldn't tell the age of the hot water tank. It turns out it's 11. That presents some insurance issues for me. The new hot water tank is $1,200 right now installed for an electric unit. I want the seller to replace that hot water tank prior to closing. You do an amendment to the deal. Again, this all happens during your due diligence. The seller agrees to it, and now you have all your conditions met. You've got your financing locked in. You've submitted your deposit. You've talked to your lawyer. You've reviewed the disclosure. You've had your inspection. It is now up to you as the buyer whether or not you are satisfied enough to complete the due diligence phase. And once you have, that is when the property is sold. Once you've agreed, I'm fine with my due diligence, my date is here, I'm going to lock the deal in, and the property is sold.
Marked as sold at that point, yeah.
Yeah, it's marked as sold and put in the system. That's when there's no backsies, right? So this is when, anytime during the due diligence, if you just decide that you don't like the color of the drapes, you can get your deposit back and walk away free and clear from the deal. If on the last day of due diligence, you've locked that deal in and the next morning you have a change of heart, your deposit is going to be forfeited unless you want to go to court and make things nasty. And getting out of that deal may be a bit cumbersome. Push comes to shove, you can probably get out of it, but a seller could then sue you for specific performance, which means they sue you and the lawyer and the judge gives you legal instructions to execute on the purchase. Or they sue you for damages, right? Wasting their time. If they can prove that you backing out of this deal after it was locked in has somehow caused them hardship, you could be liable for that. But I always tell people, trust me, by the end of this 10 days or 7 days, whatever our due diligence period that we've negotiated is, you will know everything you need to know to feel comfortable locking this in.
Yeah.
And that leads us to step 5, which is the preparation for closing. So sometimes, if you write an offer on day 1 and then you've got a 10-day due diligence condition period, you may not close for another 30 days after that or even 60 days after that. So you're kind of twiddling your thumbs. Drinking heavily, spending all that money that's supposed to be for your down payment.
Buying a new car.
Don't do any of these things. You effectively are preparing for that closing by way of, packing, connecting utilities at the new location for effective on the closing date, scheduling any work repairs that you might want to do to the property. You've got to make good use of that 30 days when you're booking tradespeople, because if you've got it in the mind that you're going to have that house painted the first weekend you move in, you might have to book that painter a couple months out. Yeah. But from an actual practical standpoint, in the days leading up to the closing, you'll hear from your lawyer, and you really won't hear from them until a couple days before the closing because they're waiting to get all the mortgage instructions from your bank. But you're going to meet with your lawyer, sign all the documents, re-sign the mortgage documents that you've already signed with your mortgage professional, and they're going to give you a total that says, all right, here's all the money you need to bring us. Your down payment, your property tax adjustment,
closing costs,
all your closing fees, and they're going to give you one lump sum total that you're going to go and get in a bank draft, and you're going to bring that down to the lawyer. So it's the lawyers on closing that handle all the actual money. I've had situations where a buyer goes, and so when do I give you the money? I'm like, you never give me the money. It all goes through the lawyer.
I made the joke about buying a car. Do not take any credit products between the time that you go firm on that house to the time that you close. Yeah. Because by some chance, the bank could do a credit check again on you the day of closing or the day before, 2 days before. That happens quite a bit. And let's say you went out and bought yourself a new whip to go with your new house, and it's now changed your monthly payment status. They might say, we can't fund this anymore because he can't make these payments. Yeah,
don't want to take for granted, don't do anything stupid. But human nature, like, okay, we got a new house and now we're going to be commuting to work and we go and buy a new car.
Yeah.
You have to be mindful of that because, as Neal mentioned, if the bank, for whatever reason, repulls your credit, or if you finance the car through the same institution that's also financing the house purchase, they're going to see that. It may change your debt servicing ratio, and that financing that they locked in for you during due diligence, they may now take back. You were going to say, yeah?
I'll continue. I'll let you finish that first.
I was going to say, sometimes I see this with new construction because sometimes it's like 6-8 months for new construction, 12 months right now. People are like, our car broke down. We had to get a new car.
Yeah.
And you need to be careful about that. But just to finish, the other thing that you do leading up to the closing is the final pre-close walkthrough.
Yes.
So what this is, if you offer on day 1 and you don't move in until 45, 60 days later, there could be a period there of well over a month that you haven't set foot in the home that you're about to buy. And in theory, anything could have happened then during that time. So what you do is you go back with your agent and you do one last visit, either the morning of the closing or the night before sometimes, just to make sure that everything is as it's supposed to be. They've tidied the home. They haven't damaged the home. Nothing of material nature has changed to the home, that they've left the appliances that they were supposed to leave, that they've topped up the oil tank, that they've made that little repair in that one room that they're supposed to do. All of these things, you do that one last visit. It's called the pre-close walkthrough. It's only supposed to be 15, 20 minutes. And then is when you tell the lawyer, okay, we've done our pre-close walkthrough, release the funds. And that way they will release the money over to the seller.
Release the hounds. And
usually what happens is they'll send those funds over the morning of the closing. They'll get confirmed over on the other side. There's some back and forth just to make sure things have cleared, courier, et cetera, and you close the property. You're usually the official owner around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Is that what you find?
Yeah, I always have around 2, 3 o'clock. you own the house.
Yeah. And the reason that's important is don't book Bell or Eastlink or whoever it is for the same day you move in, because they're going to say, we'll be there sometime between 9 and 5. You'll think that's fine. That's the day I'm closing. I'm going to take the day off work. It's no big deal. If you don't own the home until 2 o'clock, you can't get them in there. So any of your cable connections, your moving vans, anything like that, book it for the day after closing.
Yes.
Right? Because also sometimes there's a delay in the closing, and then you've got a problem.
Yes. And one thing, actually 2 things I want to add. Prior to closing, one thing I'd say is the most common mistake that I see is people forget to have their insurance ready. Even if I send them an email or whatever asking to get their insurance ready, they almost always do. And your bank's not going to send mortgage funds until there's active insurance on the property. Mm-hmm. So you need to get that. Now, it's not the end of the world because you can call and get insurance pretty well immediately on the phone.
Yep.
It's getting a little bit, there's some hold and all that. But that would be, I'd say, the one item that most people forget. And then, like you're going to say, so on that pre-close walkthrough, in the event that you do find an issue, that becomes an issue for the seller that they have to fix that. Now, this market's gotten so crazy, some sellers will be like, go pound sand. I've even had builders say, go pound sand, where we get there and we're missing parts that were agreed upon in the contract. And they say, well, if you don't want to buy the house, we'll gladly take it back and sell it for more.
Yeah. You've got the rights to the property and the seller has the obligation to sell you. That said, they're still the owner. Right. So this isn't just a slam dunk of the seller's supposed to do the right thing in this circumstance. There's a gray area of what the right thing is. More often you see things like, oh, they left a bunch of junk under the deck and behind the shed.
Very common.
I don't want to have to throw this junk out. What's it cost to do a couple loads of junk? So you get in the back of this whole thing on the day of closing, like, is it going to be $500 for the junk? Is it going to be $1,000? Is the seller going to come back the next day with their friend to get the junk? It can get really messy. But these are things that can come up on that pre-close walkthrough.
So this is where the agents come into play a lot, I find. Yeah,
totally. I mean, we're going to switch topics here shortly, and we're going to take a hiatus because I need to deal with a pre-close issue here. We're getting late into the day, but it's been back and forth since this morning at 10 o'clock or something really material has come up. And so I was like, we feel like we accounted for that in the sale. I'm like, not to this degree, and now we have to sort this out. But you go through this process. The day of closing is meant to be all roses and sunshine. And unfortunately, sometimes that's not the case. But with a good team around you, you will get through it. This is when you can call the lawyer and be like, push these jerks, right?
Exactly.
I'm not standing for this. Yeah. And, you want your lawyer on your side. This is where they make their money. Yeah. And your agent's working behind the scene with the other agent negotiating. Yeah. If you don't have this rapport, you're going to be feeling like you're left on your own here in the final moment. And with that respect to the insurance, to be clear, that should be addressed during your due diligence period.
Yes.
One thing, though, is most insurance companies will not lock insurance in until it's
4 weeks.
60 or 90 days before the closing. So if you're closing in 3 months, you're going to be like, call us back later. And what you're going to do is you're going to forget to call them. Right?
Exactly.
So, but again, your agent will remind you of all these things leading up to close, and you'll get it all done. So that is the process. There you go. Boom. Now we're switching.
You own a house.
You own a house. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Now let's turn it into money, Dave.
Now we're about to make you some money.